So something is happening. I don't know what it is. Tucker Carlson gave a speech at Turning Point USA. And not only was he criticizing Israel and the U.S. involvement with that, he also criticized the information that has been reported about these so-called there are no Epstein files, and also talking about, I guess, economic issues. What is happening here, folks? I don't know what's going on. Now, I'm not going to go far and say that Tucker Carlson is a lefty. Some people are saying that on social media. No, that's not the case. But what is happening is he is basically calling out what I would say are some of the things that Donald Trump said that he was going to fix. He's calling those things out at a Turning Point event in Tampa, Florida. And honestly, I feel like maybe that's the person it needs to come from. Maybe it needs to come from him. Maybe it needs to come from Marjorie Taylor Greene, people who supported Donald Trump and are upset with his policies, are upset with what he's doing. Maybe that's who people need to hear it from. So listen to this part. This part here is about the economy.
Biggest house in New York. Like, what is that? Like, at some point, the basic economics really matter. And they matter because not that it's bad that rich people are getting richer. It's bad that everyone else is getting poorer. And it's especially bad that young people can't afford homes. Let me just put a very precise point on this. If you want a measure of how your economy is doing, I personally favor eliminating GDP as a measure. I don't even know what that is. It's clearly not relevant. They tell me Japan has a stagnant GDP. Have you been to Tokyo? It's the single most radicalizing experience you'll ever have because it's just so nice. You lost the war? Really? Can we lose a war and wind up like this? GDP. No, I don't know what even that is. The total economic activity. Oh, no. My measure is really simple. I got a bunch of kids. Can they afford houses with full-time jobs at like 27, 28? And the answer is no way. And the answer is that 35-year-olds with really good jobs can't afford a house unless they stretch and go deep into debt.
So what was interesting about this is I feel like during the 2024 presidential election, when Tucker Carlson was talking about Trump and he's friends with Trump and hanging out with him and all that kind of stuff, I feel like these things weren't said. And I think what is happening is people are starting to see, okay, we had Trump was president, Biden was president. Biden said he was going to heal the soul of America and all that kind of stuff. The economy, got worse. Trump's president. People are like, hey, things still aren't adding up. That's because some of these issues, like being able to afford a home, right? The high rents, these have been problems for a long time. Prior to Trump, like I remember dealing with the high rent situation under Obama's presidency. Like that's how long some of these problems have manifested. So I think that's part of the problem. And I think the reality is most of us knew what the solution should be, but the politicians are not willing to do that because they don't answer to us. They answer to their donors. They answer to corporate America. When you saw what happened during the housing crisis, Barack Obama bailed out Wall Street. He didn't bail out the people who lost their homes and their generational wealth. You can start there. Let's continue.
I just think that's a total disaster. That's a complete disaster. Why? Two reasons. One, if people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in. And the country gets super volatile because people feel like they've got nothing to lose. When you have a lawn, trust me, you're thinking long term. Second, it's really hard to have a family without a house. It is. It's like super fun to live in an apartment if, there's like a bar downstairs, you're in a cool neighborhood. I'm in East Village. It's so cool. Try to have 3 kids. You're not going to have 3 kids there. You can't. Nobody wants to raise their kids in that neighborhood. Nobody wants to raise their kids in an apartment. People do it because they have to. Nobody wants to.
And that's true. People don't want to. And there are some places in this country, like you guys know in California, I don't know anybody that's lived in California that's been able to own a home. Everyone I know that's lived in California lives in an apartment, whether they have kids, husband, or not. And if you look at the cost of houses in California, it's kind of almost impossible for someone to be able to buy a house there, even if you're middle class. This is ridiculous. I use California because that's the most expensive state right now to own a home, to get a home. Massachusetts, we're running into similar issues here. It's not quite as high as it is in California, but I'm worried that it will get that way. Worried that it will get that way. So it's interesting that this is coming from him. A lot of us have been saying this for a long time. You've heard people say this on the left. You've heard socialists say this, etc. Right? Like AOC says this, Bernie says this, Shama will talk about this, the cost of living issue and what people are going through. But it seems like to me, maybe, just maybe Trump supporters need to hear Tucker Carlson say it. Maybe they need to hear it from somebody who also supported Donald Trump like they did. You know, it's one of those things. It's like somebody else can say something about your, how do we phrase this? You know how someone else can say something about your family and you kind of take it the wrong way. But if another family member says something about another family member, it's a little bit different. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe it needs to be people on that side that are calling these things out for it to break through to people. And then when more people wake up and say, you know, screw this political system, we need to have other options. Let's continue on a little bit more here.
People want a little house, not some McMansion, just a little normal house. That is the actual American dream. And that is what is totally unattainable for young people. And so the only young people in general that you will ever meet who have houses are young people whose parents helped them. And God bless their parents. That's a perfectly great thing to do for your kids. But most people's parents can't afford to do that because they're already in debt from their pointless college degree.
So that's another thing. There are also people that have a home because their parents left it to them in their will. Their parents passed away and that's how they were able to become a homeowner. That's crazy. But that's where we are in 2025. I'm trying to tell you guys, I fully do not believe that after the '08 housing crisis, I don't feel like the economy ever fully recovered from that. There was some recovery, but I don't feel like it ever got back to what it was before that housing crisis. Because I know there's many of us that have continued to work like multiple jobs, odd jobs here and there. And it just seems like no matter what you do, you just can't catch up, or you just hope and pray that you don't have an unexpected expense. That's what it seems like. Now, that was the economic part of the conversation. Again, I thought that was pretty interesting. And then it goes into the Epstein part of the conversation and the Israel part of the conversation. And again, I feel like maybe they needed to hear it from him.
All of that. But the thing I hated most was their total unwillingness to answer any question about why they were doing what they were doing, because it was just too insulting. And every single time I would just feel like raising the middle finger and screaming obscenities, which is not an adult response, I'll concede, but that's how I felt. And I think that's really at the heart of why the Epstein thing is so distressing. I mean, the guy was some weird sex freak who was abusing girls. We knew that. But the fact that the US government, the one that I voted for, refused to take my question seriously and instead said, case closed, shut up, conspiracy theorist, was too much for me. And I don't think the rest of us should be satisfied with that. And by the way, let me just say really quickly, because I was so mad about it that I think I found out part of what's going on. I think we are going to find out more. And I think the truth, for whatever it's worth, in case you're interested, is that the DOJ didn't release lots of incriminating sex videos with Epstein and his billionaire pals because they don't have them. They don't have them because when the original search warrant was served 2007, I think, possibly 2006, I think 7, it was basically designed to protect Epstein. The search warrant was written in such a way to make sure that the feds never got their hands on the actually incriminating evidence. It's another way of saying the cover-up has been going on since 2007, almost 20 years.
That part right there, guys. See, this is the part, again, that a lot of times people don't bring this up. Everybody talks about like when his more recent arrest, Epstein's more recent arrest, and then he was, you know, supposedly unalived or whatever after that. But they don't go back to that arrest that he had. And it was either 07 or maybe he's right. Maybe it was 06. I thought it was like 07 during that time. A lot of people don't go back to that arrest that he had then. So basically what Tucker Carlson is saying is like, I don't know, maybe he may have been offered some type of protection going all the way back till then. But one thing that I do want to say is I want to remind everybody, don't forget, Whitney Webb tried to warn people about this for years. She wrote 2 books about it. One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1 and Volume 2. You can get those books on Amazon right now. I know that's where she's selling them. Try to get them soon. I don't know how longer they will be up there, considering there's a lot of uproar about this whole Epstein situation, which I'll get into with the Trump Epstein story. But Whitney tried to warn people who Jeffrey Epstein was and all the players that were involved as a part of this. Let's continue.
And so the real question is not, was Jeffrey Epstein a weirdo who was abusing girls? Yes, we can answer that. The real question is, why was he doing this, on whose behalf, and where did the money come from? And those are the questions that need to be answered.
And to that, Tucker Carlson, I would say that he needs to interview Whitney Webb. Right? Because Whitney Webb answered those questions. Just saying.
And I think it's entirely fair to ask them. And it's not adequate to say anyone who asked them is somehow desecrating the memory of little girls who died in Texas. They're not going to put up with that answer. I don't care who gives that answer. That is not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And
he was working for Mossad. And this is why I think Tucker Carlson should interview Whitney Webb. I don't know if he would be able to interview her in person, but it could be a virtual interview if possible. I know it seems like he likes to do his interviews in person, but Whitney told us about this for years. Now, here's the thing. No shade to folks, because here's the thing. On social media, I noticed like this has been clipped and it's shared all over social media. It's gone viral and people are saying, whoa, Tucker Carlson is saying that Jeffrey Epstein may have been working for intelligence. And that's what made me realize how many people don't know about Whitney's books, how many people don't know about Whitney's reporting on this said topic, which has been around for years. So I just basically retweeted it and said, yeah, just letting you guys know, Whitney Webb exposed this years ago. Here are her books so that people can read them if they choose to. But again, like I said, maybe that message to that crowd at Turning Point USA, maybe that message needs to come from someone who supported Trump. Maybe that's who they need to hear it from.
Have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that.
You guys see what's happening here? You heard the people cheering in the crowd? You see what's happening? You see how he's trying to express this to conservatives that supported Trump, that, hey, this whole Israel thing is a problem. We don't need to be putting them first, et cetera, et cetera. You see how sometimes the message has to come from someone who's a part of the same club? Because I can scream this all day. I can scream this at people, at coworkers that I know that supported Trump. I can scream this all day long. But the reality is, they're probably more likely to listen to someone if it's coming from someone that's a part of the same club as them. So maybe this is what needed to happen.
My entire life, pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered a bunch of people, participated in the murder of a sitting U.S. president. It's got a whole trail of crimes. That doesn't make me a disloyal American. It doesn't make me anti-American in any sense. I was born here. My family's been here for hundreds of years. I love this country. That's why I live here. So criticizing the behavior of a government agency does not make you a hater. It makes you a free person. It makes you a citizen. You're allowed to do that because you're not a slave. You're a citizen. And you have a right to expect that your government will not act against your interests, and you have a right to demand that foreign governments not be allowed to act against your interest.
Uh-oh. Metal Nick said, where's the lie? Okay, guys. Okay. So see what's happening here, folks? Wait till we get to the MTG part. Wait till we get to the part where she's introducing that legislation. Let's continue.
That's not creepy. It shouldn't be forbidden. And yet all of us have trained ourselves to believe that you can't say that somehow, that that's like too naughty and forbidden. And the effect of making that off limits has been to create a lot of resentment, and I'll say it, hate online, where people feel like they can't just say, like, what the hell is this? You have the former Israeli prime minister living in your house. You have had all this contact with the foreign government. Were you working on behalf of Mossad?
You know, that's what we've been, haven't we been saying? Like, that's what people have been saying. That's what a lot of people who were like, whoa, this guy is, we need to start asking some questions. So the theme tonight, again, is enough, because it's just like watching some people, I don't know, like they're pulling their teeth to try to find a way to defend Donald Trump from this. It's scary. It's appalling, right? But Whitney told us, Whitney Webb told us, these are Whitney's books. I shared these on Twitter, One Nation Under Blackmail, Volume 1 and Volume 2. So you can find out how all of this worked together, ladies and gentlemen. And then there's another part here that he said that I also think is very important, where he said something about you can't serve two masters. This is interesting.
I also refer to common sense when I say that no man can serve two masters. It's not possible. I only have one wife for that reason. You say to your wife, I'm gonna take another wife, but I'm gonna love you just as much. Nothing's gonna change. My wife's gonna look at me like, no, it's one wife. Because you can only really pledge your loyalty to one person or one country. This is just a fact. And there's also a sense, and this is relevant to me, and I know you're speaking about Israel, but it's not just Israel, to be honest. I think it's a huge problem. I think anybody, by the way, who serves in a foreign military should lose his citizenship immediately. There are a lot of Americans who've served in the IDF. They should lose their citizenship.
I don't know if those people are leaving because of what he said or if they just had to go to the bathroom. I don't know. But this part here where he's talking about if you served in the IDF, then you should lose your citizenship in the United States. I mean, we talked about this before when JFK said that Israel should, or AIPAC, excuse me, should have to register as a foreign agent. Now, at that time, it was given a different name, but it became to be known as what we know today, which is AIPAC. And I agree that I think JFK was correct about that. Imagine how different things could have been if that would have happened, but we don't know because he was killed. And we got into this tangled web of a relationship of sorts with Israel to the point where we can't even have Congress members vote on legislation in a way that they know is morally right because they are bought by the lobby. That's how bad it has become. But he goes on to say that
immediately. There are a lot of Americans who've served in the IDF. They should lose their citizenship. There's a lot of Americans who've served in Ukraine, and they should lose their citizenship. You can't fight for another country and remain an American, period.
Why is that wrong? What is wrong about what is said there? What is wrong about what is said there? We have been saying this over and over. It does not make any sense. This Israel first strategy. It does not make any sense. Now, here's the other part. I told you, people need to hear. Sometimes people need to hear from their own people. Sometimes people need to hear from their own club. Marjorie Taylor Greene apparently is moving forward with her own venture here. Marjorie Taylor Greene mentions Israel nukes stating that she is entering amendments to strike $500 million more from nuclear armed Israel. So listen to this and I'll show you the tweet that she posted.
I'm entering amendments to strike $500 million more for nuclear armed Israel. And it's important to say nuclear armed Israel because they do have nuclear weapons. This is not a helpless country. And we already give them $3.4 billion every single year in the state from the State Department, $3.4 billion every single year. They don't need another $500 million in our defense budget. That's for the American people's defense. That's for the defense of the United States of America and our borders. Israel, you can nuclear armed Israel. I think it's really important to phrase it that way. Nuclear armed Israel doesn't need $500 more million from the American people. Our government just bombed Iran on their behalf and destroyed Iran's nuclear problem. So I'm entering an amendment to strike $500 million more for nuclear armed Israel.
There's more information here. Amendment announcement for defense appropriations funding bill with the sprinkle of slight rant and sarcasm delivered on a bed of raw truth. I'm introducing amendments to the Department of Defense appropriation bill that will cost $831.5 billion to prohibit funding for $500 million for Israel, $500 million for Taiwan Security Initiative, $500 million for Jordan, $15 million for HIV prevention educational activities, approximately $118 million for overseas humanitarian disaster and civic aid. I love our military. I like Pete Hegseth. I think Pete Hegseth is doing a great job as Secretary of DOD. We couldn't have had a better president and commander in chief. And this is where I give pause, right? Because Donald Trump approves of all this money going to Israel. But she goes on to say here, the U.S. Department already gives nuclear armed Israel over $3 billion every single year. Nuclear armed Israel has nearly decimated Hamas and Gaza all by themselves. They have not. She's wrong about that. And we just successfully bombed Iran's and wiped out Iran's nuclear program for nuclear armed Israel. They did not wipe it out. Nuclear armed Israel's national debt is under 400 billion compared to our crippling national debt of 37 trillion. Nuclear armed Israel seems to have their defense and debt under control. So the American taxpayers should not be required to give nuclear armed Israel another 500 million in our U.S. defense bill. And then she goes on for other appropriations as well. Maybe Tom Massey might, approve this with her or something. I don't know. But I will say something is happening here. Something is happening. I honestly thought, I'll tell you guys, I honestly thought that only the left was going to be like, yo, this Israel thing is a mess and we got to get out of there, right? Stop giving them money. I thought that was only going to be a left position. I did not expect people, particularly those who voted for Donald Trump, to also have that same position. So that has been a surprise to me. So who knows? Maybe Tucker, maybe him and Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe they can, wake up some of Trump's other supporters and just say, look, something has to change here. Something has to change. And also maybe they can wake them up to realize, or more so Tucker, I think, than Marjorie Taylor Greene, that Donald Trump lied to you. He lied to you. You ain't got to be devastated or anything. Hell, every politician in my life has been lying. Because I voted for Barack Obama. Big lie. I had a lot of hopes. A lot when I voted for Obama. We all been lied to. So it's nothing to be devastated about. And I see some people breaking down on social media and they're seriously oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. You don't need to be devastated. It happens. They lie and they're really good at doing it. But enough is enough. Stop all the money going to Israel. We got to focus on people right here in the U.S. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.